and welcome to today's discussion. My name is Mark Sapsford, and I've brought together three experts within the field of M&A, working on from the wealth management, legal and corporate finance to talk about your business exit and planning for the future. With that being said, I'd like to introduce you to the panel. So over to you, Jonathan. If you could explain who you are, your firm and what you do within your firm would be great.
Sure. So my name is Jonathan Moon. I'm an investment director with Rathbone Greenbank. Rathbone Greenbank is Rathbone's sustainable, ethical and impact investment division, meaning that we look after clients that are interested in aligning their portfolio with their values, and it's my role to advise them on their investments accordingly.
Great, thanks very much. And Malin?
My name's Malin Svanberg-Larsson. I'm a corporate partner at Freeths. We're a full-service national law firm, which means that we look after all of our clients' legal needs from start to finish.
Great, thanks very much. And Douglas?
Douglas Edmunds, partner at CapEQ Advisors, or CapEQ. We're a corporate finance advisory working with shareholders of privately owned businesses, helping them working towards an exit.
Great, thanks very much. We've got a lot to get through today, and what I'd like to start with is talking about business owners and getting themselves ready for an exit. And from Rathbone Greenbank's perspective, Jonathan, your views on that?
We often find that business owners, as part of the sale, often put their own personal finances on the back seat and almost feel as though that might jinx the sale. But in fact, there are advantages of thinking about how they can plan personally before the exit and maximise the efficiencies and allowances available to them and their family. And it's also a chance to take stock, upskill yourself, learn about what the future might entail from a financial perspective at that time, and engage with a team of trusted advisors who can help guide you through the journey.
Great. And Malin, from your perspective, from legals, how does that tie for you?
I would wholeheartedly agree with what Jonathan has said. Getting planned early is invaluable. There's so much going on during a transaction that really, if you can get your ducks in a row ahead of time, it will save you a lot of thought and energy to really focus on the transaction when you get there.
And Doug, connected to that from a corporate finance perspective?
Yeah, I mean, well, from all three perspectives, whether it's legal or personal financial planning, and the same from a corporate finance perspective, I think timing is key. And I think understanding in your mind what the timing of an exit event might be for what will effectively be the largest financial event in an individual's life, and understanding where your business and where you fit into that is absolutely essential. That goes to business valuation metrics, what the market's doing, market conditions, etc., and extrapolating that across all three areas of the advice that you might seek to make sure that you're equipped to make the right decisions at the right time.
And of course, timing is an issue. When we're in the midst of a transaction, the last thing people have is time on their hands to think about wealth. So doing it upfront and spending that time whilst you're outside of a transaction, you don't have a buyer applying pressure, is also invaluable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've seen previously is if you can plan early, you have time to plan well and really think through all of your options that no doubt, Jonathan, you will take clients through, and then you can focus wholeheartedly on getting the transaction through and negotiating the points that are important from the transactional perspective separately.
Great.
Yeah, to your point earlier, Mark, I think that during a transaction there are a lot of balls in the air for business owners going through the machinations of that, and the last thing you want to be doing is having to deal with certain aspects of the legals or personal financial scenarios at the same time as the pressures that come with that transaction.
Then can we get into business owners and what is that preparation phase? What do they need to start thinking early doors from a wealth perspective, and then probably on corporate finance? But Jonathan, if you don't mind just giving us an insight into what are the critical points that a business owner needs to think about as early as possible?
Sure. Well, from a corporate finance perspective, clearly engaging with advisors such as CapEQ will give them an idea of the options and valuations available to them. But I suppose from a personal financial planning perspective, one thing that we find business owners really engage with and like to use is a sense of what we call lifetime cash flow planning analysis. And this essentially allows us to help the client visualize what their financial future looks like over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years, how much they can afford to invest, how much they want to reserve for their own personal spending in the next couple of years, whether they want to gift their loved ones in the future, and whether they want to plan for later life care. And it's a really useful and powerful tool for explaining the financial freedom and independence that they might have post-transaction, and that we can advise them on that and then give them their investment options available to them as well.
And how much of that planning gives relief to a business owner? They may not think that it's going to give them relief, but having that planning and having a team around them gives them a sense of security.
Definitely. I think it's a really, really powerful way of visualizing their future. And often these concepts are quite abstract to them. These individuals have been the masters of their own ship prior to the business sale, but are venturing into a new world which is unknown to them. And tools like this and having advice from individuals that have their best interests at heart hopefully provides a lot of comfort and reassurance to a new area of investment to them.
And of course that goes to that they've been managing their own wealth because it's within their business and all their wealth sits within the business. It's another thing to now run wealth in a different sense.
That's right. I think it's certainly a new experience, delegating the authority or delegating the responsibility to manage their own wealth to someone after that event. But hopefully by building a relationship with trusted advisors, that can come with time.
Great, thanks. And Douglas, from your perspective, from a corporate finance perspective?
Yeah, well, Jonathan touched on a couple of points earlier, actually. The first one being creating options, and that's part of what a good corporate finance advisor will do. And many business owners don't really understand the different types of exit scenarios that there can be. And coming out of that is then different forms of payments, essentially, of when the funds might arrive from that transaction. And clearly that then plays into forward planning for wealth and when those funds arrive, and making sure that you've understood all the options and understood what the implications of those might be.
And of course, some of the information from Jonathan's perspective of identifying issues that maybe play out in the future, as in planning, tax planning, things like that may be required to be taken to contextualise further down the process, to identify that we need to slow the process down or speed the process up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more about, and it's not as if you need to scenario plan every different thing, because the reality is you'll plan out 4 scenarios and you'll end up doing the 5th one. But what you can do is think about the different options, understand what they look like, and then start thinking about what you would do in those situations.
Yeah, and I think that the crux of it is that knowledge is power. So the more information and education you can get yourself ahead of time, the more into that scenario planning you can do when you are faced with the scenarios that are on the table. So I'd echo completely what Jonathan and Doug are saying.
Plus, I also think the reality is that this is preparing for the unknown. You don't know when a buyer is going to knock on your door. You don't know when a life-changing event could happen. So this planning, when you've got time on your hands to be able to spend time to consider all of the things on the table and understand where value may lie, is essential for future planning as well. I'm sure you'd agree.
100%. And having that team of advisors there to assist you, whatever the outcome, is critical, I think.
So what happens if a client doesn't plan? What are your experiences on no plan whatsoever?
I suppose if they're lucky, the consequences are small, but it will clearly depend on the context and circumstances in which they find themselves. I think I spoke earlier about cash flow lifetime modelling and how that can help provide reassurance to a business owner about entering that next stage of their life. And without that foresight or forward planning, there are going to be unanswered questions for them, such as were there any personal allowances they could have utilised prior to sale? How can they provide for their family in the future? And what are the investment options available to them? And what impact does that have on them as an individual? And these are the sort of questions that we can help clients grapple with and provide answers to.
But then conversely, if, and clearly things overtake them and they suddenly find themselves in the last week, 10 days of a transaction, what does that look like from your perspective and your team's perspective of trying to give a level of advice or lead?
I think it's about really being as reactive as possible and trying to support the client in as timely fashion. I think recognise that this period is fraught with uncertainty, and being on hand to be able to advise in whatever scenario there is to provide the best advice for them is what we can do as advisors.
Great. And then for Douglas, from your perspective, because you'll be in the trenches at this point in time anyway.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of angles really here. One is very practical. I'll give you a real life example. A fairly common scenario, business owner has been approached by a potential acquirer, keen to do a deal quickly, and what they had not done, which they had said they were going to do sometime previously, was to put in place a share option scheme for senior managers. the net result of that was that they had to significantly increase the size of the options to compensate for the tax position that those employees were going to be left in. Whereas if they'd done that sort of 2-3 years previously, as they'd made the promise to do, then there wouldn't have been the same tax impact. So, practical example of where not planning ahead can have a significant financial disadvantage. There's another angle as well, which is sort of an emotional one, and this is really about where there are multiple shareholders, and those shareholders all understanding between themselves what an outcome needs to look like for it to be viable for all of them, and to not have those conversations early, and for those individuals to not have taken advice from people like Jonathan around wealth management and what the outcome can look like for them, means that you can get a disjoint in what people's expectations, aspirations and requirements are from a transaction, and that can blow the whole thing apart very quickly.
Great. And Malin, from your perspective?
Well, I think put simply, it often leads back to you end up paying more tax. If you've not utilised all your personal allowances that we've talked about, or you've not put in place your share option scheme for your employees, normally it's only the tax man that wins. But kind of coupled with that, it is a really intense period of time in somebody's life. So it will just be more intense, and it will be more longer hours talking to your advisors. And yes, you trust them and you like them and we all get on. But there are probably things you want to be doing at 10, 11 o'clock at night that's not sitting on the phone to your lawyer. So plan early and plan ahead to try to limit that disruption.
So Jonathan, how does a client start that journey of wealth management or wealth planning?
Sure. So my role is investment director, but I work very closely with our financial planning colleagues. And I think when we're thinking about business exits for owners, the key thing to recognise is that they are their subject matter experts. They've built this business up over years and years and years and know it in and out. And they're about to embark on a new venture in their lives, one which they perhaps aren't as familiar with regards to investment, markets, financial planning. So the first sort of piece of support we can give clients is actually helping them build up their knowledge and upskill them with regards to financial planning. So run financial awareness courses to help them understand our world. And then beyond that, I talked earlier about cash flow analysis, and cash flow analysis, again, is a really useful tool for help visualizing their financial future, how independent they can be, what their life looks like for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And from a final investment perspective, the financial planning angle allows the maximum tax efficiency of the portfolio. So the financial planning works alongside the investments to make sure they have the best possible outcomes post-sale.
Great. And I think the reason why we put this panel together today is to show intrinsically linked how wealth, legals and corporate finance should work together, because ultimately the planning on the front end from your perspective and your team's perspective of getting clients ready for that journey enables them to go away and over the next 9 to 10 months whilst legals and corporate finance are doing their work to be able to come back, and then once the money and funds are transferred, then all of that planning and all of the 8 or 9 months that you've spent getting ready is then put into action.
That's exactly right. And there's lots of steps that can be taken prior, during and after sale to maximise the output of the capital generated from the sale.
Great. And I think from Douglas, from your perspective?
Well, look, this is clearly Rathbone Greenbank's, Jonathan's area of expertise. So we can't help with the personal financial planning. I guess the only helpful piece of advice that the corporate finance advisor can offer is to give some insight into what the process looks like in terms of timing, in terms of the different steps that they're going to have to go through to get to that exit point. So I guess, again, to understand the timing and the when to appoint and start talking to legal and wealth management.
Thanks, Doug. And Malin, from your perspective, having the preparation done, how does that help you in your phases?
So from a transactional perspective, it's great to have all that information, but particularly for my private wealth team, who sort of straddles the corporate and the personal world, we work really closely with Jonathan's financial planning team to make sure that whatever structures they identify as the best way forward are implemented, whether that's passing wealth down through the generations in one way or another, making sure that children who are married and are coming into significant sums of money have got prenups or postnups in place. As the lawyers, we are quite often the doomsday sayers, but we are there to make sure that wealth is protected and make sure that it matches what Jonathan and his team is implementing for their clients.
And interestingly, Jonathan, you and your team also give advice, knowledge to individuals, young people that are coming into wealth. So it's not only about the shareholders that you're giving that knowledge to, but you're also giving it to their children so they understand that future planning.
That's right. And we've been talking here about the financial implications of sale, but actually there are emotional impacts of sale, and families do have to prepare for what life with, this is often life-changing sums that have been generated in the capital sale. And the families will need to prepare for what that looks like for both them as individual parents, but also for their children as well, and dealing with that. And so we run financial awareness courses to help their children build up their own technical ability when it comes to investments and finances, really as a way of upskilling them and helping them through that process.
And I think it goes to, I think we can all attest to the emotional roller coaster that this whole process produces. And often it's the least expected experience you have, and it could be one of your children or someone within the shareholder group that has a different opinion on where they feel value should be associated to them. So, okay, now let's explore now that the business owner and the family or families have decided that they're now going to take their business to market. Douglas, from your perspective, from a CF perspective, what preparation is done at that stage? So now a client has decided and engaged with you. What is the preparation that's done to get a company ready to go to market?
Yeah, look, in an ideal world, we'll have engaged with them, through our strategic advisory services months, if not years ahead of this, in order to get this information and this knowledge fixed. In reality, that's not always possible. So we're sometimes dealing with this in a relatively short space of time. But what we're looking at is essentially the business from the perspective of a buyer, what they'll be looking for, where they'll see risk, and making sure that we can answer questions on the front foot rather than be on the back foot, and potentially even trying to generate that information as it's being asked for. So when we first engage with clients, what we're going to do is look at what information is available. We're going to look at management information, financial information. Legals will be involving the likes of Malin and Freeths and the team there to look through some of the dry stuff, if you forgive me, the articles of association, shareholders agreements, all those kind of things to make sure that those ducks are in a row. And then we're going to be looking at the wider market. What do buyers in that space expect to see when they're doing a transaction? In an ideal world, we don't have to put things right. Sometimes the truth is that we have to sort of spend a little bit longer fixing some of the things that we know are quicker to fix now than they will be when you're at the 11th hour in a transaction.
And how much does that go to value later on in the process? The ability to get everything, all your ducks in a line, and present the business in the way that the buyer is expecting it to be delivered. Where does that go to in value? Does that increase the value?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of ways that that's seen. Firstly, the more information that you can present a buyer with on the front foot, the more confident they are. It instills confidence in their decision to press forward with an acquisition. That's always really helpful. The bottom line is momentum is everything in a transaction, so that the faster you can keep things moving along, the more likely the deal is to actually get over the line. And for us, that's critical. For our clients and the certainty that brings, that's really critical. So the more you can do up front, the better prepared you can be, the more likely you are to get that certainty of a deal done, and then you can move on to working with the likes of Jonathan and Rathbone Greenbanks to the next stage.
Great, and of course that's understanding the metrics that are required for each specific market, understanding what that buyer is looking for and information they're requiring.
Yeah, the whole process for us is about educating our clients as much as we can about what they can expect to see during a transaction stage. You don't know what you don't know. Our clients are generally really smart people who have a deep level of expertise in their field. What they haven't generally got, because this is usually the first and only time a client will go through this process, it's not always, but it usually is, that they don't know about how a business is viewed from the outside. And frankly, they're biased. It's their baby. They have a view of their business which isn't always reflected in the way a business will be viewed through the cold, hard eyes of a potential acquirer.
Great. Malin, from your perspective, having that level of detail behind you?
It's gold dust, quite frankly. And I think, Douglas, you picked up on this already. It's Transactions are about confidence. It's the buyer's confidence that the information they are receiving is correct, that there are no skeletons hiding in the closet, everything's always been done properly. Now, we all know that business owners are busy running their businesses and not preparing for sale, because you can't live life like that. But the sooner we can get involved and working alongside Douglas and corporate finance advisors, the more under the skin of the business we can get, which means that we can then help protect value. So our job fundamentally is to make sure that the money sellers receive on completion stays in their pockets. And we do that by knowing the information, always being on the front foot with the buyer, always being able to tell them the answer. And sometimes the answer is, look, we did have this problem, but this is how we fixed it. So therefore there's no risk to you, Mr. Buyer. And again, that comes back to the confidence piece and also the momentum piece, which is the quicker you can get a deal over the line, the happier everybody is. But also probably we've maximised the return that you will get.
I've said this before, if I had a quid for every time a client said to me, my business is clean, there are no skeletons in the closet, I wouldn't need to work, right? So the truth is that they don't necessarily know when there's an impediment to a transaction that's going to get in the way later down the line. Better to fix this stuff early and get it dealt with and remove that obstacle before it becomes a hurdle or a barrier to a transaction.
So again, it comes down to planning and thinking just that 1 or 2 steps ahead of when do I want to go to market. I need a couple of months just to get my house in order and all the information pulled together so that we can put the absolute best foot forward with whoever our preferred bidder is.
And of course, this leads to due diligence further down the line, the ability to put a well-populated data room with all the information they're going to require sends a strong signal to a buyer that everything is prepared and it's ready for them. Because on the same score, conversely, from a buyer's perspective, they're spending a huge amount of money on due diligence, having a team that's ready to go. The information's there and to hand enables them to speed through the transaction. So it also, we hope, lessens the cost for a buyer through that phase.
Yeah, and it's, this isn't a game, it's deadly serious, but actually there is a sort of balance of power, a pendulum that swings towards our clients and then back towards the buyer at different stages of a transaction. And as with any negotiation, at certain times, one party feels emboldened. And if you're in that late stage of due diligence, possibly in a period of exclusivity, and then there is a piece of information that's missing that's critical to the buyer, that sort of the balance of power has shifted away from us, our clients, and that's not a great outcome for us. If that's something that we need to fix.
So let's pick up further then on a business owner that's now contemplating this journey and turning around and saying, well, I want to get to this value. How do all of you value a business? I suppose I'll start with you, Douglas, because I think this question would probably come more to a CF than anyone else. But where is value and how do you quantify a value of a business?
Well, it's a gnarly subject, isn't it? Yeah. The only way you'll ever know what your business is worth is by going out to market and talking to potential acquirers. Everyone's got a view on what they think their business is worth, and very often people are wrong about that. I mean, the first thing that a good corporate finance advisor is going to do is to look at the business, your business as a client, and look at the market and comparable transactions, and what the space is doing, and try and give a steer, a gauge as to what value can look like. And that's obviously going to inform our clients' timing to a degree as to whether they want to go to market. I mean, Jonathan and his team, I guess, have a role to play here, because sometimes a client will have an expectation on value because they think that's what they need to achieve to get the life result that they're looking for. And the reality is that might not be the case. It might be too little or too much in terms of where their aspirations and expectations lie. We can give a steer and a gauge right up until the point where we actually start talking to potential acquirers. But the information there's an additional factor component in that equation, I suppose, isn't there, John?
Definitely, and clients will often ask themselves that question, and we may ask them the question, how much is enough, or what is this number that is critical importance to you? And then it's our role to try and translate that into what that means from an investment perspective and supporting their lifestyle thereafter. So that is a critical part of the puzzle, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose the other point is, and this goes to us sort of fixing our clients with knowledge, is, deal structures. They vary so widely that clients very often have a view that they're going to take a lump sum of money from a transaction and walk away. That's not always the case. It's not even always what they want. And actually, different scenarios can play in with private equity buyers, with an MBO, the management buyout, or even an employee ownership trust, where the outcomes financially are very different for clients, and understanding their objectives and what they want their outcomes to be is really important, and for them to understand what the kind of flow of funds, if you like, is going to be out of those different scenarios is also really key to helping steer them down the right path.
And for business owners that have had advice from their friends, whether they be close friends or down the golf club, that they've had a conversation on their friend's business sold for X, what would be your advice on that perspective?
Don't listen to them. Don't listen to any of the advice you've had down at the golf club or in the pub or any of that stuff. I mean, look, every scenario is different. You can never compare like for like. Businesses are more like people than they are like houses. It's really, you can't directly compare them in the same way that you can two houses on a street. The nuances are far and wide. So I think the only thing you can do is talk to people who are doing this stuff day to day, who have a really good idea of how a market will react, can do the research, can do the analysis to give you a better idea as to what you're looking at in terms of your business value, and that may shape when you decide to go down that route.
And then a clear comparison is then comparing a non-listed business to a listed entity and saying they trade at X multiple. Your views on that as well?
I mean, that gives you a starting point. It's one of the factors that we build in when we're looking at giving a steer to our clients on this. I mean, you can look at other transactions that have happened in that space. Values will be different because businesses' size will be different, albeit that they do the same thing, or they might be the same size but doing a slightly different thing in a slightly different market. So there are multiple components in play there, and that's why you can't really compare like for like. But all you can do really is look at the different facets in these situations, and maybe even give a range, I suppose, is the closest that we can come to.
Great.
Just if I might add something, and Mark, you touched on it earlier, clearly value and valuation is really important, but this is a massive milestone for the business owners, and it's so much more to it than the number that's going to be written on the check at the end of it. So think about structure and have early discussions around structure. Is it going to market and selling to a third-party trade buyer or private equity the right thing? Or do you actually want to think about passing the company on to the existing management team or succession planning through the business? Or should you be passing it on to all of your employees? And these are all different structures that come with, of course, pros and cons, because everything does. But it's also a way of shaping value that is important to you, that's not just zeros at the end of a big number, but it has more emotional power and more kind of on the sustainability and passing it on through the generations. So that's an important factor I would consider as well.
No, I agree. And Doug, this goes to your point of CapEQ is a B Corp. What does that mean to CapEQ, and what does that then in turn mean to your clients?
We're a professional services company. We can't save the world environmentally, and we can do our bit. But what I suppose what we can commit to doing is giving the best advice to our clients based on what they want their outcome to be. That's our sort of mandate, if you like. Our promise to our clients is to make sure that they understand all the options and to find the right one for them, regardless of what that looks like for us, because we're here, we're on their side. We want to do the right thing by them.
And it goes to Malin's point, because you think about the wider stakeholders, not only the shareholders, it's the wider group.
Yeah.
And for those that want to reflect their values in their portfolio after the transaction, clearly there are advisors such as ourselves who can help them do that. All portfolios can be sustainably aligned, and they can reflect an individual's preferences from a sustainability and ethical standpoint. So that's something that can happen after the business sale as well.
So let's talk advisors. From a client's perspective, they could do it themselves. I would suggest they probably couldn't do legals. But for your perspective, why would they want, and why do they need to instruct advisors to help them in this process rather than doing it themselves?
Look, could someone do this themselves? Yes, it does happen. Are they likely to get the outcome they want? It's highly unlikely. I think you appoint an advisor because you don't know what you don't know. You're going into a process that is very often a path untravelled. Malin, we had a scenario just this morning where we were involved in a discussion with somebody who thought they could go this route on their own.
We did, and it's always an interesting discussion to have. And Mark, we do sometimes, not so much with our clients, but I've just closed the transaction where the seller was unrepresented and did the legals himself. Oh, wow. I think it's probably fair to say, and this applies to all three of us, you are, as Jonathan said, you are the master of your own company and you know everything there is to know about that. You are the subject expert, just like we are the subject experts in the areas that we operate. By instructing advisors early, we can help navigate a path that maybe clients haven't been down before. We can help troubleshoot before we know troubles are coming over the hill. It is just about being prepared and being on the front foot. And as Douglas mentioned earlier, it's that pendulum of power swinging backwards and forwards. Both sides are well represented. It means you will have a fair fight. You will all push in the same direction and you will get the result that you want much, much quicker.
And we have a parallel situation on the personal wealth front where post-business sale, the client clearly has the option of managing their investments or organising their finances themselves. But in actual fact, often post-sale, they don't have the time or the inclination to do that. And if they're honest with themselves, perhaps not the knowledge as well. So many business owners will take some comfort in having a team of advisors who have their own best interests at their heart and are able to advise them accordingly. And that is refreshing to them.
One of the questions that we get asked very often late in a process, Malin, is this normal? So our clients will come to us, the buyer's made a demand or there's a clause in the purchase agreement and what they want to know is should I have been expecting this? Is this normal for a transaction or are they asking for something that's unreasonable? And if you've not done it before, you just don't know. And you could be agreeing to things that are just not reasonable to be agreeing to. It's one thing to say a client might have the ability to execute a transaction by themselves. That the truth is, good advisors will increase both the value and the likelihood of a transaction happening, and for the outcome to be both the one that they want, but also one that they started with. It's very easy to enter into a transaction with somebody and find that the value that was originally offered gets eroded very quickly once you're down a path. And that's what we're here, Malin's here to protect. And ultimately that's what Jonathan is here to head off a bit later on in the process.
And how much shelter do you think you provide for a client? It's an
They'll
emotional...
never know. They'll never know. Part of our role is to act as a buffer. We can have those difficult conversations. We're not there to be liked by everybody. It's quite nice if we are and we all shake hands at the end of it. But there are scenarios where our clients actually want or need to work with the buyer post-transaction in some kind of handover or an earn-out, or even to roll on their interests and continue with the buyer in a partnership. And if there have been and there will be difficult conversations along the line during the transaction, it makes that future working relationship very much more difficult. So we can act as that buffer. We can have those difficult conversations and we can protect them.
And plus, also the other thing, and I think it's key to all of you, is our client that's going through the process, whether it be the majority shareholder that's going through it, they very rarely can speak to other people because this is a process that's done in highly confidential basis. So realistically, you become their extra board member at the table during this process and counsel to be able to provide that right knowledge.
You're in the trenches in a transaction, the details are coming in thick and fast, and sometimes we do end up being, as well as corporate finance advisors and lawyers, counsellors, psychotherapists, all of the above, to just help smooth the path.
And I think the one point I would add to that is, when you are in a transaction like this, that you are still running your business. You still have to make sure that your growth trajectory is heading in the right direction. Your staff are still happy. Everyone's still contributing, growing and prospering. Running a transaction, a lot of our clients tell us, it feels like a second job. You're being inundated with questions and what about this and have you thought about that and can we have the projections for the next 3 years, please? And having professional advisor sitting alongside of you will help filter some of those questions that a buyer is asking, because it would be quite nice to know, versus and distilling that down into actually what is important, what is going to drive this transaction forward, where is the value, how do I protect that value? So there's a lot to be said just for having somebody buffering between you and the buyer. And it also takes a bit of the personnel side of it out, because you're not feeling like the buyer is coming at you personally and saying, you haven't got your employee share option scheme in place, or your employment contract is not as great as it could be. That's not a slight on the person. That is just the buyer's advisors doing their job and protecting their client. And it's just making sure you get the balance right between being properly advised early and trying to save money. And often trying to save money is just going to take you longer and probably cost you more in the long run.
It's worth pointing out that both Malin and I work on the other side of transactions as well, helping clients to buy businesses, and so we know how the world is looked at. We can look at the world through that lens, which helps us to preempt some certain scenarios. But it also means that we have a feel for what's coming down the line in terms of the questioning, and again, it goes to knowing what's normal and what's not.
Great. And from Jonathan's perspective, I suppose at the end of the day, from a business owner's perspective, they know their business, they know how they're going to generate income and generate profit, and how their business is going to operate from month to month to year. It's been part of their life for so long. Now they come to a situation where they have, hopefully, a large amount of money in the middle of the table. And now it's like, okay, well, now what do I do with that? And of course, your experience and your team's experience of saying, well, okay, there's a myriad of things we can do. They're not just thinking about, well, I'll just put it in my bank account. And as much as craziness that may sound, and that has gone on over the years, and we've all had instances that we're in the last week and it's all going in one bank account and wherever that leads. But it's that now changing and they may not and probably don't have the knowledge to how to manage money.
That's it. And professional advice is exactly that. It is professional. And that's the thing. Malin and Douglas, clearly you're going to know the bumps in the road through this process and will have experienced this before, so can advise clients accordingly. And I guess from our side, exactly as you say, Mark, it's really about preparing the client for the next generation, the next phase of their life. As Malin said, the process is stressful in its own right, and actually coming away from that and looking past that, potentially handing over or delegating responsibility for the management of their wealth going forward is a big decision, but one that the professional advisors can help with. And to your point on inflation and cash in a bank, often people think that that's the only option available because they haven't really been familiar or become surrounded by the world of investment and don't understand, whether inflation is more than the rates they get in the bank and what effect that has over time. And so, our role is to educate them to understand, how their investment can provide for the short, medium, and most importantly, the long term.
Thank you for sharing your insights this afternoon. It would be great if you don't mind just to summarise each of you. What are the highlights of working with an advisor?
Well, I think the first thing, or my key takeaway, is to give the clients time to take stock of the scenario and potentially forward plan. And part of the personal wealth advice is our role is to help motivate them about what phase 2 of life looks like and how exciting that can be. So engaging with advisors early, really to help you plan for the future and the next stage in your life.
Great. Malin?
From our perspective, it's certainly a point early, get your ducks in a row, and then just maximise the value that you can out of the transaction through speed and clarity.
Okay. Douglas?
Yeah, we're all going to say the same thing, aren't we? In an ideal world, you appoint your advisors early, or you engage with them, you get good advice, and you increase the probability and likelihood of a positive outcome.
Great. Well, thank you, and I really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you. If you appreciated these insights and want more tailored discussion about how to get your business exit ready, go to CapEQ website and leave us a quick message. We'd love to hear your story, and until then, thanks for watching.